Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Innovation Room podcast. I'm your host, Tori, and I'm here with my co host, Rhiannon and Huff. Y'all, today we are talking all about the sign buying journey, and this is going to be a multi part episode, so you can stay tuned for those future episodes.
Good to be back. I wasn't on last week's episode, so happy to be here. And like Tori said, in today's episode, we're going to cover why it's so important to have quality on-site branding, how to choose a sign company, and all those juicy tidbits that everybody wants to know. So let's dive in. Okay, so we're going to dive into the value of on-site branding, Tori. You never walk into a McDonald's, or when you ever walk into a McDonald's, you see their brand, their logo everywhere, that big yellow M. And it's on every inch of their building, from menu signs to reinforcing McDonald's values and offerings to even in the bathrooms, you see that logo. And we're not saying that you need to copy McDonald's or do exactly that. But when you brand a space, you really need to keep your logo and your brand top of mind. And it's important for a client and a customer to have multiple points for the clients when they come in to have that brand awareness throughout your entire space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think McDonald's obviously does that really well, has been doing that really well for a long time. But you don't I think there's also this idea that you have to be a retail space in order to brand your space really well. So we work with some retail brands and they've got a plethora of signage of all different types and it works really well to attract customers when they're outside the store and then also to reinforce that brand once they're inside the store. But y'all, it doesn't just apply in those spaces. We also work with a number of financial businesses and they use branding of all types all across their spaces. We work with some logistics companies. I was As I was putting together the pieces of this episode, I was thinking about a couple of brands in particular. One, we literally painted their logo on the roof of their headquarters because the CEO wanted to see it as he was flying into town and wanted to be able to see the top of their building. We worked with another brand and put their logo on the floor. So we like to say that we've branded from top to bottom, right? We can do it all.
Yeah.
But right, those are just some more extreme examples of ways that you can brand your space really effectively. But even in what are the decals that you're putting in the bathroom, right? We work with a brand, a veterinary group, and they want to put their values all over the walls, right? And they want to share their brand that way. So there are lots of different ways that you can do it, but it's not just your sign, right? It's all the unique touches in this space that draw customers or clients in a unique way.
And it's that top of mind awareness. So
Yeah.
McDonald's is one of those. I don't know if you've ever done those branding quizzes, Tori,
Hmm.
where they'll just have the logo without the name of the store or the location. Everybody
Yeah.
knows what that yellow M is, or the
Hmm.
Nike swoosh. So everybody tries to have that top of mind awareness, or that's so important. And like you said, it's not just retail, it's
Hmm.
all across all of different companies. I
Hmm.
think of things like I'm one of those people that I don't like to go into places that I'm not aware of or I don't know. I,
Yeah.
I would rather go, and I just talked to my husband about this. I'd rather go and do an impromptu speech in front of 3,000 people than go someplace I don't know and am unaware of my surroundings. It makes me nervous. So when I
Yeah.
first started this job, thinking of even airports, and
Mm.
the wayfinding in airports and really getting from one destination to the next to the gate. And it made me nervous. And as I got more comfortable, I'm like, okay, Rhiannon, you work for a sign company, look for the sign. So
Yeah.
things that you don't even think about to make your customers' lives in retail stores, they have higher up where you can see junior section or women's section, things along those
Yep.
lines that all companies really truly need to think about and be aware of. How can I not only have my brand top awareness of all of my clients, it's in the back of their head all the time, but how can I make their experience easier? Right now, we're also
Yes.
seeing, obviously, due after COVID, we see in parking lot spaces where the pickup or the to go parking. And those are clearly marked. I even are my Walmart real close to me, they're revamping that entire section for that grocery pickup. So again, it's just so interesting to see how companies dig in and dive into how can we tweak this to make customers' lives easier. So it's something that we really push on our clients. What else can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think 2 other pieces that I would add to that are architectural signage is a type of signage that not a lot of folks think about, but it's those kind of like unique pieces that maybe it's not your name, but maybe it's a portion of your logo or some other symbol or architectural element that speaks to your brand. And your sign company can probably help you with that. And the other piece that specifically on that wayfinding side of it, that aligns with ADA regulations, right? Especially if you're in a larger facility, like an airport, maybe you're on some sort of large industrial campus, right? Not only do you need those wayfinding signs, but you need to make sure that those are ADA compliant, meaning that they're meeting contrast standards, they're meeting material standards, they're meeting height and size requirements, right? There are a lot of pieces that go into that as well. But making sure that people can navigate your space, making sure that it's really accessible, right? Even stuff like handicap parking signs are all really important, and your sign vendor can help you with that. So, as you're considering what are my signage needs, maybe think outside the box or talk to your sign vendor about how they can help you make your space really accessible and easily navigable, but also, of course, still staying true to who you are as a brand.
You're right. That value of branding, just like when we said when we first started this, is just so
Yeah.
important in thinking about all of those different steps. And that's where a sign company truly is valuable and really
Mhm.
should be able to walk you through. And a lot of times now we want the out of the box thinking of how
Mhm.
can we make this unique and how can we make our brand stand out.
Mhm.
Look for a sign company that really can help you navigate all of.
Okay, y'all. The second thing that you really need to think about before you can fully dig into signage is, of course, who's going to be your sign vendor. And Rhiannon mentioned this in our last section. Of course, the most important part of choosing a sign company is you got to have one who's an expert in their field. Even better is if they're an expert in your industry, right? The sign needs in retail are very different from what's necessary in the manufacturing space versus the logistics versus the healthcare versus maybe the airports, like Rhiannon was talking about, right? There are different needs, and a sign company who's an expert in that field is going to really be able to help you identify those places where you might need some extra support or where they might be able to help you out.
100%. And that's something to ask when you're looking for a site company is their portfolio. If
Yeah.
you are saying healthcare and you're in a hospital and you're going to need these wayfinding signs and ADA signs, make sure that they've done something like that before because it is a
Mhm.
different beast. It's a completely different way that how we do signs. And you just want to make sure that what sign company you choose has that experience. If you are rolling out a huge project, so you have two, three, four, 500 upwards of stores, and you're rolling out a large project, has your sign company done that before? A very large
Mhm.
project. Do you need one sign company? Are you going to need two sign companies for this?
Mhm.
Or more, depending on what you do and how much that sign company can handle. So you'll also want to determine, again, this is completely based on individual company need. So you'll also want to determine if you need a regional or a national vendor. Really, that determines how many, or really, it's how many locations you have. As you're
Mhm.
starting out and you are just growing maybe locally, a local vendor can help you with that. Also, if you're using a local vendor and you have no idea where to start, call a national vendor and potentially ask them, who do you use in this area? We're not
Mhm.
necessarily ready to go national or ready to get a national vendor, but if you have anybody in the industry that you can call, that's huge. They'll have that knowledge of putting permits and requirements and other local specifications that you really need. On the other hand, you may need to switch to a national vendor as you're growing, expanding, where you really need somebody to project manage that location or your locations from start to finish. You really need a national brand that has a footprint that is all across the country. And again, depending on your company, are you more city located or are you more rural? Are you out in kind of the outskirts, depending on your
Mhm.
brand? We'll say Dollar General. There's tons of Dollar Generals, but a lot of those locations are in very teeny tiny towns. And does your national sign company, when you're expanding, have the reach to be able to get their local sign vendors and their partners? So that's another question that you're really going to want to ask, especially if you're going national. What is their criteria for those local vendors that they use and partner with? North
Mhm.
American Science has been around for, I'm just going to brag on us a little bit. We've been around for 90 years. That's awesome. And I'm so proud of us for that. But at the same time, that gives us 90 years of building relationships with these partners across the
Mhm.
US. One of the questions we get asked so frequently is, do you self perform or do you sub out?
Mhm.
There are very few sign companies. It's just such a niche market that actually self-perform across the US. And most of those are going to be your franchisee type of footprint. So with us, for example, again, you're going to want to know what those relationships are. What are their criteria for selecting vendors? Are they, if you have huge, large, tall buildings, what is their footprint in large cities? Are they used to going and working in Chicago? Chicago is not an easy sign place to work for because they have so many specific criteria and everything that they need in regards to legally putting signs up. And getting those permits can be extremely difficult. So,
Mhm.
looking for a sign company that's versed in that, that can handle that type of, sometimes we need variances in signage where a client really wants a specific type of signage, city says no go. And we have to go through a variance in a legal process to make sure we get that sign made and up on the wall for them. So again, these are all questions that we have to ask. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But what I want to say is just not all sign companies are created equal. It is not apples to apples all the time. So make sure you are comparing apples to apples when you're looking for a sign company. What are their capabilities? What are their partnerships like? How long have they been in business? What does their portfolio look like? And what they can do for you. So we
Yeah.
recommend having help with that, asking around, getting recommendations is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true of any industry, right? Getting that peer recommendation is often a great way to find a vendor for any need that you might have. We get a lot of business through referrals. So consider that as you're looking for a sign company. And we also did an episode discussing some of those top questions that we get asked as a national sign company. So you can find a link to that episode in the description below. And that will probably just help give you some good recommendations on what questions that you should ask your sign vendor.
All right. Third topic here is something that not everybody likes to discuss, but everybody wants to know. It's understanding pricing for this custom sign. Everybody that we talk to, clients, everybody, one of their first questions that we get asked is, how much is this going to cost? What do I do for a budget? If we need, everything is driven by price, especially in this economy. Things are rough, things are hard. Sometimes sourcing materials are difficult and that drives up the price. Obviously, we've talked in the past about the skills trade gap and how that's affected us. Maybe there's not as many techs in the area that can drive up price. But here's a secret to signage quotes at North American Sign. And likely this is probably true for others in the industry. It's almost possible to give quotes immediately. There are tons of questions that we need to answer before we give an accurate quote. And that's where I'm going to throw in a little bit of this is the RFPs. I think we've talked about this potential past podcast, but
Yeah.
we don't participate in an RFP that has 20 plus sign companies in it. We just don't. It's not our cup of tea. It's not what we do. We do a lot more custom signage. And it's not because we don't necessarily want your business. Of course, we want your business. However, when you do a large RFP like that, it's almost like there's too many cooks in the kitchen
Yeah.
And to get the accurate pricing for that, it almost, again, that price driven battle. And people are going to throw in their lowest price. They're going to put in as the best they can. And the problem is, can they continue with that pricing after the RFP long term? Or are there going to be a lot of change orders where they have to up the price? Is everything included in that? So that's where
Mhm.
we truly tend to like to do more of a partnership type of setting and really understand your needs as a client. And I highly recommend, because in those RFP settings, that's when you get into the price battle, but you're not comparing apples to apples. Do they have the same
Mhm.
internal component? Are every sign company in that 20 RFP sign company bid, are they using the same internal component? Are they using the same LEDs? Are they all quoting the same power supplies? What is that? How is that sign made? Again, we talked about in past episodes where one sign for up north compared to potentially a hurricane or tornado zone, it can be manufactured completely different. So that's where we really encourage people to have that partnership with their sign company. Let them know all of your ins and outs. If you have specs, fantastic. We want to look at those. We want to see those. If you don't have specs, we want to make sure that we are fully understanding your needs before we price anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the other, I don't know, just I guess like reality check as a part of this. Like, y'all, signs are not cheap. And frankly, they shouldn't be. Okay. Because this is your brand that we're talking about. And we're not, obviously, we're biased, right? We are North American Signs is a sign company, but your brand isn't cheap, right? I'm sure you would never describe your brand that way. And so don't treat it that way. Signage is a thing that's worth spending money on. And we're not saying that we want to like price gouge or something like that, but what is your brand worth to you? Do you value it? Is it a thing that is important to you, is important to your employees, is important to your stakeholders and customers? I certainly hope so. And so that's why at North American Signs, we can't quote you right up front because we have to consider all of the different needs of your brand and the needs of the different locations. It could be something as simple as you are in different retail spaces, for example, every place has got a different facade. Where is the electrical located? Are we going to have to run something up into your facade? Does it exist already? Do we need to repair a facade before we can put a new sign on the wall? Do we have to paint it? If we have to paint it, we can't do that in the middle of winter because it's too
Right.
cold out and you got to wait until it's warmer. So, stuff like that, that your sign company should be able to help you out with. But those are all the different tiny little factors that you have to think about before you can quote a sign. And it's I think it's different from other other areas, right? Because installing, um, I don't know, an oven or
An
something in
HVAC
a
unit.
commercial an HVAC unit, right? That's just it's just gonna be different. That quoting something like that is probably a little bit simpler than what we're doing for signage, right? We've got to think about surveys. Surveys cost money. You got to pay somebody to go out there and take a look at the facade and see what exists or what doesn't exist. You have to think about materials like Rhiannon mentioned, and maybe the material needs of one location are different from another location. And so maybe your signage can't be as universal as you would like it to be. Maybe there are landlord requirements. Sometimes they require a particular installer or a particular manufacturer. You got to think about permitting and how much that's going to cost, right? Permitting in New York is sky high, right? Permitting in a like a Fort Wayne, Indiana is probably a little bit cheaper, right? But
Right.
there are just so many tiny details that you have to think about as you're quoting. And so an experienced sign vendor is going to be able to help you with all those pieces.
Another thing that you can ask, and that just came to mind while you were talking, Tori, is shipping.
Mhm. Yeah.
For example, one thing that we get asked all the time is, do you have on-site manufacturing? We do. We have a manufacturing plant on site. However, again, depending on where your locations are, majority. So if I'm working with somebody that's the majority of their locations are on the West Coast, I would
Mhm.
probably recommend using one of my partners that are closer on the West Coast that I know can manufacture the sign up to my standards. And of course, again, we've vetted all of these. But when you think of shipping cost, sure, absolutely, I can make it in house. But
Mhm.
if I've already vetted somebody and I know that my partner can make it just the same, but is a lot closer to California per se, and those shipping costs are going to be astronomically different.
Mhm.
So again, where are your locations located? Where do your sign companies partner with wholesalers that manufacture across the country? And what does
Mhm.
that look like? Some people, again,
Mhm.
it's very different. Some people want that to make sure that we have the quality control from start to finish, that it is
Yep.
in house. They know exactly. And we do have brands that are very specific on that. And that's okay. But again, each company is different. And what is important to you? What are you willing
Mhm.
to spend that money on and what are you not willing to spend that money on? Shipping is a good example. So
Yeah.
again, looking at the internal component. Not all power supplies are created equal, not all LEDs are created equal. What materials are we using? So that's
Mhm.
where we really want to dig in and dive in and make sure that we know exactly what you need and create this partnership back and forth. Maybe there's something that you didn't even think about. We've done a lot of cost saving techniques for our clients.
Mhm.
And that's us again digging into really how that sign is made. Maybe we can come up with a better solution or a more or an easier solution that takes that
Mhm.
cost down. So we are constantly collaborating with our client to make sure that we are innovating and have those clients' needs in mind. And if you can let us know, hey, here's what our budget is, here's what's
Mhm.
going on, great, hands down. Let's see if we can work within that budget. But we're going to be transparent with you from the beginning. And again, one thing that we really pride ourselves on is not having those after the fact change orders. That's
Mhm.
really annoying as a client. And
Yeah.
I know again from experience, and I've had a lot of clients come to us after the fact where they thought their budget was one thing. And come to find out, again, once we get into all the nitty gritties and all the details of everything, there's these little hidden costs that keep getting applied to these proposals. We don't want that. We want to have all those costs transparent and upfront to you so that you know exactly what that budget needs to be. So again, these are questions that you need to ask sign companies when you're vetting sign companies and really trying to find out what your budget is, what the cost is, and what's going into these signage. It's so important. Again, some people don't like to talk about cost, but we really do want to help you out here and make sure that we're upfront. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's yeah, I think I should clarify my earlier point, which is not that we don't wanna make it as expensive as possible for you. Certainly not. Of course, I'm sure that any quality sign vendor is gonna wanna work with you on price, but that's why we really prioritize building relationships with our client so that when that client comes to us and says, "Hey, I just got 5 grand knocked off my budget for this. What can we do?" Right? We have that relational capital with each other where we're going to prioritize and make sure that we make it work for everyone so that we're still getting paid and you're still getting the amazing quality signage that your brand really deserves. But you've got to have that relationship, which is something that we've beaten into the ground in previous episodes is the value of those relationships. So, yeah, y'all, we hope that this is helpful in determining what you are looking for in a sign vendor and just how to go about that sign buying process.
thank you all for joining us today. This is only part one of the topic. Remember, stay tuned for more nitty gritty details of the sign buying process and branding in our next episode.
Absolutely. We've got lots more coming in future episodes, and we can't wait to share. You can also sign up for our monthly InAssign newsletter at the link in the description below. That newsletter just provides more educational resources like what you get here on the podcast. And of course, as always, let us know if there are other signage related questions that you have for us in the comments below. Let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes. Until next time, y'all, keep innovating.